The courtroom fell silent. The spoiled rich girl, Tiffany Hartford, stood defiantly in front of the judge's bench, arms crossed, her designer dress sparkling under the harsh fluorescent lights. The entire courtroom watched in shock as she smirked at Judge Jamal Robinson, a well-respected black judge known for his fairness, but also his firm hand when it came to justice. "You think you can boss me around, old man?" Tiffany scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I don't take orders from people like you." Gasps filled the room. The prosecutor's jaw dropped. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably. The court reporter stopped typing for a second, completely stunned. Judge Robinson, however, remained calm. He took off his reading glasses and set them down carefully on his desk. His face was unreadable. "Miss Hartford," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Do you have any idea what you just said?" Tiffany shrugged. "Yeah, and I meant every word of it." She laughed as if she were talking to one of her rich friends at a party. "Look at you, sitting there, thinking you have power over me. Do you even know who my father is? He practically owns half this city. You're just some." "Enough." The judge's voice boomed through the courtroom like thunder. Tiffany flinched slightly, but quickly covered it with another smug grin. Judge Robinson leaned forward. "Miss Hartford, your words and behavior in this courtroom are beyond disrespectful. But since you believe you are untouchable, I believe it's time you learned a lesson." Tiffany rolled her eyes again. Yeah, just give me a fine or whatever. I'll have Daddy pay it." Judge Robinson's eyes darkened. "No, Miss Hartford," he said slowly. "That is not what I have in mind." The courtroom held its breath as the judge prepared to deliver a sentence that no one, absolutely no one, expected. 1 month earlier, the morning sun beamed through the towering glass windows of the Hartford mansion. Tiffany Hartford, the only daughter of billionaire real estate tycoon Richard Hartford, lounged on a luxurious velvet couch, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. Her mother, Vanessa, walked in, holding a fresh cup of coffee. "Tiffany, your father and I are going to a charity gala tonight. You should come with us." Tiffany snorted. "A charity gala? You mean a bunch of old people in ugly dresses pretending to care about poor people? No, thanks." Vanessa sighed. "Tiffany, one day, you're going to have to take some responsibility. You can't just spend your life shopping and partying." Tiffany waved her hand dismissively. "Why not? We're rich, remember? Daddy makes more money in a minute than most people see in their lifetime. I don't have to worry about anything." Her mother shook her head and left the room. Tiffany returned to her phone, grinning as she planned another night out with her equally spoiled friends. Later that night, Tiffany and her two best friends, Ashley and Brianna, stepped into the hottest nightclub in the city. The bouncer let them skip the long line without question. Inside, they danced, drank, and flaunted their wealth as if they owned the place. But Tiffany wanted more. She was always chasing a bigger thrill, something that proved she was above the rules. "Let's take Daddy's new car for a spin," she suggested with a mischievous grin. Ashley hesitated. "You mean the Bugatti? The one he just bought?" Tiffany laughed. "Yeah, come on, it'll be fun." A few minutes later, Tiffany was behind the wheel of a sleek, midnight blue Bugatti, her foot pressing hard on the accelerator. The city lights blurred as she raced through the streets at dangerous speeds, ignoring traffic signals and stop signs. Ashley and Brianna screamed in a mix of terror and excitement. Tiffany slowed down, but Tiffany only laughed. What's the worst that could happen? Then, out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights. A police siren wailed behind them. Tiffany groaned. "Oh, come on. This is such a waste of my time." She pulled over lazily, rolling down the window with an unimpressed look as a police officer approached. "License and registration, please," the officer said sternly. Tiffany scoffed. "Do you know who I am?" The officer's expression didn't change. "Miss, you were driving over 100 miles per hour in a residential area. Step out of the vehicle." Tiffany rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, "This is so stupid." But she complied, still acting as if none of this mattered. However, things took a turn when the officer ran her information and realized she had multiple unpaid speeding tickets and a record of reckless driving. "You're under arrest for reckless endangerment and driving with a suspended license," the officer announced. Tiffany's eyes widened. "Wait, what? You can't arrest me. Do you even know who my father is?" The officer didn't budge. He handcuffed her as she screamed in protest. Ashley and Brianna sat frozen in the car, too scared to speak. Tiffany was taken to the police station, where she expected to be released immediately. After all, her father had gotten her out of trouble plenty of times before. But this time, things were different. This time, her case was going to court. And the judge? Judge Jamal Robinson. The courtroom was packed on the day of Tiffany's trial. Journalists filled the seats, eager to report on the latest scandal involving the billionaire's daughter. Tiffany walked in as if she were on a runway, wearing an expensive designer dress and a smirk on her face. She was convinced this would be just another slap on the wrist. Her lawyer whispered, "Tiffany, please, just be respectful and let me do the talking." But Tiffany wasn't listening. She was too busy rolling her eyes as the judge entered the room. Judge Robinson took his seat. He glanced at Tiffany, his expression unreadable. "Miss Hartford, do you understand the charges against you?" Tiffany yawned. Yeah. Speeding, driving without a license. Whatever. Can we just get this over with?" The audience murmured in disbelief. Tiffany's lawyer paled. Judge Robinson's eyes darkened. "Miss Hartford, you are in a court of law. You will show respect." Tiffany laughed. "Respect? For what? You? Please." Another wave of gasps filled the room. The judge's grip on his gavel tightened. "Miss Hartford, I will give you one last chance to behave appropriately." Tiffany smirked. "Or what? You gonna lecture me about responsibility? Save it." The courtroom was dead silent. Then, Judge Robinson spoke. "Miss Hartford, since you clearly believe you are above the law, I have decided on a fitting punishment." Tiffany's smirk wavered. Judge Robinson continued, "You will not be paying a fine. You will not be walking free. Instead," the entire courtroom leaned forward, holding their breath. Tiffany's eyes widened. "Wait, what do you mean instead?" Judge Robinson's next words left everyone speechless. Judge Robinson's gaze never wavered as he delivered the sentence. "Miss Hartford, since you have made it clear that you believe wealth places you above the law, I am sentencing you to 6 months in juvenile detention, effective immediately." The courtroom exploded. Gasps. Murmurs. Even Tiffany's lawyer looked as if he had been punched in the stomach. Tiffany's mouth dropped open. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. What?" she stammered, her voice no longer cocky but panicked. "You can't do that. That's insane." Judge Robinson remained firm. "Miss Hartford, your repeated reckless behavior could have cost innocent lives. You have shown no remorse, no respect for this court, and no regard for the consequences of your actions. This is not about money. This is about accountability." Tiffany turned frantically to her lawyer. "Do something," she hissed. Her lawyer gulped, standing quickly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is final." Judge Robinson interrupted, slamming his gavel down with a loud crack. "Bailiff, take her into custody." Tiffany's world shattered. The sound of heavy boots echoed as 2 uniformed officers approached her. No, she shrieked, backing away. "You don't understand. I'm not like those criminals. I'm rich." The officers grabbed her arms firmly. Tiffany kicked and thrashed. "Get your hands off me. Daddy will fix this. This isn't happening." Her father, Richard Hartford, stood up angrily. "This is outrageous. I'll have every lawyer in the city on this case." Judge Robinson didn't flinch. "Your daughter's sentence stands, Mr. Hartford. If you believe otherwise, you are free to appeal." But Tiffany wasn't hearing any of it. Her designer heels skidded across the floor as she was dragged from the courtroom, screaming at the top of her lungs. "This isn't fair." Then, just before she disappeared through the doors, Judge Robinson spoke one last time. "Fair." His deep voice carried across the room, silencing the chaos. "Miss Hartford, welcome to the real world." The courtroom doors slammed shut behind her. Hours later, Tiffany sat in a holding cell at the local jail, still in disbelief. The cold metal bench beneath her felt nothing like the silk sheets of her mansion. The air smelled of sweat and cheap disinfectant. This was a nightmare. She had expected to pay a fine, maybe do some community service, not this. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped the sides of her head. No, she whispered, rocking slightly. "This can't be happening." The sound of a door buzzing open made her jump. 2 female guards entered, both looking unimpressed. "Time to go," one of them said. Tiffany swallowed hard. "Go where?" The second guard smirked. "Juvenile detention." Tiffany felt her stomach drop. Her hands were cuffed again, and she was led down a long hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows on the gray walls. The entire experience felt surreal. When she reached the transport van, a wave of dread hit her. She was about to be locked up with criminals. Her entire body trembled as she was guided into the vehicle. The metal doors shut behind her with a loud clang. Tiffany sucked in a breath, her heart pounding. The van rumbled to life, pulling away from the station. And just like that, the spoiled rich girl was on her way to jail. The ride to the detention center was long and silent. Tiffany sat stiffly, staring straight ahead, afraid to move. Her mind raced with one desperate thought: Daddy will fix this. He always fixes everything. But when the van pulled into a fenced compound surrounded by razor wire, that hope started to fade. As she was escorted through the entrance, she saw teenage girls in orange jumpsuits walking around the courtyard, some glaring at her, others whispering. Her designer dress, once a symbol of power, now made her stand out in the worst way possible. A female officer unlocked a gate. "Welcome to your new home, Hartford." Tiffany swallowed hard as she stepped inside. The officer led her to an intake room. "Take off your clothes," she instructed. Tiffany's jaw dropped. "Excuse me." "You heard me," the officer said, unfazed. "You're getting processed." "Strip." Tiffany hesitated. "No, I won't. This is ridiculous." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a choice, sweetheart." Tiffany's hands balled into fists. She had never felt so powerless in her life. But she quickly realized this wasn't the world she was used to. Here, her last name meant nothing. Slowly, she did as she was told. Once processed, she was given an orange jumpsuit. It smelled like industrial soap. She cringed as she put it on. Her long, golden hair was tied back into a simple ponytail. Her jewelry, her designer clothes, everything that made her was gone. Tiffany Hartford no longer existed. She was now just another inmate. Later that night, she was led to her cell. It was small, cramped. A metal bunk bed, a thin mattress, and a shared toilet. Her cellmate was already inside, a tough-looking girl with short, dark hair and sharp eyes. The girl looked her up and down and smirked. Well, looks like we got a princess in here." Tiffany crossed her arms, trying to look confident. "Stay away from me." The girl laughed. "You think you're better than us, huh?" She leaned in, her voice low. "You're in our world now, princess. You better learn the rules fast." Tiffany's stomach clenched. The door clanged shut behind her. And for the first time in her life, she was truly alone. Days passed, and Tiffany quickly realized that juvenile detention was nothing like the life she knew. There were no luxury meals, just bland, tasteless food. No soft beds, only a hard mattress. No special treatment, only rules she had no choice but to follow. And worst of all, no daddy to save her. The other girls watched her closely, waiting to see if she would break. And soon, Tiffany would face something far worse than bad food or an uncomfortable bed. Something that would make her wish she had never spoken back to Judge Robinson. Something that would change her forever. That night, as the lights went out, Tiffany lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Then, a voice whispered in the darkness. "You're gonna learn real fast, princess." Tiffany's heart stopped. Before she could react, a shadow moved toward her. She barely had time to scream. Tiffany barely had time to scream before a rough hand clamped over her mouth. Her eyes widened in sheer terror as she struggled against the weight pressing down on her. "Shoo," the voice whispered in her ear. "You don't want to wake up the guards, do you?" It was her cellmate, the tough-looking girl with short, dark hair. Tiffany thrashed violently, trying to break free, but the girl was stronger. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, her breath coming in frantic gasps. Then, just as suddenly as the attack had begun, the girl let go and backed away, laughing. "Relax, princess," she said, shaking her head. "I was just messing with you." Tiffany scrambled to sit up, her hands trembling. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. The girl smirked. "I had to see if you'd fight back. Guess what? You didn't." She leaned against the bunk, arms crossed. "That means you're weak. And weak girls don't last long in here." Tiffany's chest heaved with panic. "Stay away from me," she spat. The girl chuckled. "Oh, don't worry. I ain't interested in you like that. But you should be worried about the others." She gestured toward the hallway outside their cell. "You think I'm scary? Wait till you meet some of the real monsters in here." Tiffany swallowed hard. The girl plopped back down onto her bunk and pulled a thin blanket over herself. "Get some sleep, princess," she murmured. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. Tiffany sat frozen in her bed, unable to close her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt truly defenseless. Morning came too soon. A loud buzzer blared through the facility, jolting Tiffany awake. "Wake up, inmates," a guard shouted. "You have 5 minutes to report to the cafeteria." Her cellmate groaned, sitting up and stretching. Ah, the sweet sound of prison life. She looked over at Tiffany. "You better move, princess, unless you want to go hungry." Tiffany hesitated. Her entire body was sore from the thin mattress, her mind still reeling from the night before. But she wasn't about to show weakness. She got up and followed the crowd of girls heading toward the cafeteria. The moment she stepped inside, she felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Some girls whispered to each other. Others just stared. Tiffany had never felt so out of place in her life. She grabbed a tray and got in line, eyeing the disgusting-looking oatmeal being slopped onto the plates. With a grimace, she sat at the nearest empty table, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. But trouble found her anyway. A girl with braided hair and a scar across her cheek dropped her tray on the table and sat across from Tiffany, grinning. "So you're the rich girl, huh?" Tiffany tensed. "What's it to you?" The girl smirked. "Name's Roxy, and I love rich girls." Tiffany frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Roxy leaned in, her grin widening. "It means you owe me rent, princess." Tiffany blinked. "Rent? Yeah." Roxy gestured around the cafeteria. "This is our world, and in our world, new girls gotta pay up. And since you're rich, you can afford to be generous." Tiffany clenched her fists. "I don't have money in here, genius." Roxy chuckled. "Oh, don't worry. We don't take cash." She pointed at Tiffany's tray. "Hand over your breakfast." Tiffany stared at her food, then back at Roxy. "No way. This is all we get to eat." Roxy's smile disappeared. "Wrong answer." Before Tiffany could react, Roxy snatched the tray from her hands and dumped the entire plate of oatmeal onto Tiffany's lap. Gasps erupted around the cafeteria. Tiffany shot up from her seat, the sticky oatmeal clinging to her jumpsuit. Laughter echoed through the room. Tiffany's face burned with humiliation. Roxy smirked. "Welcome to jail, princess." Tiffany's hands shook. No one had ever treated her like this before. Back home, if someone disrespected her, she could ruin their life with a single phone call. But here, she was powerless, and that terrified her. Later that day, Tiffany sat in the corner of the recreation area, hugging her knees to her chest. She was still fuming over what happened at breakfast. How could this be happening to me? Her cellmate, the girl with short hair, walked up and sat beside her. "Tough morning, huh?" Tiffany glared. "Go away." The girl ignored her. "Name's Jada, by the way. Figured we should get that out of the way since we're stuck together." Tiffany didn't respond. Jada sighed. "Look, princess, I get it. You're scared. You're mad. You're not used to being at the bottom of the food chain." Tiffany shot her a look. "I'm not at the bottom." Jada smirked. "Oh, then why do you smell like oatmeal?" Tiffany's fists clenched. Jada chuckled. "Relax. I ain't here to mess with you. I just thought I'd give you some advice." Tiffany crossed her arms. "I don't need your advice." Jada shrugged. "Fine. Then you can keep getting humiliated like you did this morning. Your choice." Tiffany hesitated. She hated admitting weakness, but deep down, she knew Jada was right. "All right," she muttered. "What's the advice?" Jada leaned back. "First rule of surviving juvie? You gotta pick your battles. You should have given Roxy your food. Fighting back without backup is suicide." Tiffany frowned. "So you're saying I should let people walk all over me?" Jada smirked. "No. I'm saying you need to be smart. Strength isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when to fight and when to wait." Tiffany bit her lip. She hated feeling powerless. But maybe, just maybe, Jada had a point. Before she could say anything, a loud whistle rang through the rec yard. A guard's voice echoed over the intercom. "All inmates, return to your cells immediately." The entire yard groaned. Tiffany and Jada stood up, but before they could head back, something happened. A girl from the far end of the yard screamed. Tiffany turned just in time to see a fight break out. Two girls were throwing punches, screaming at each other. The guards rushed in, but before they could stop it, one of the girls pulled a shank. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. The girl lunged. The other girl screamed. Blood sprayed onto the concrete. Chaos erupted. Guards tackled the attacker. Inmates screamed. And Tiffany, she stood frozen, watching as the girl collapsed, clutching her stomach. Her entire world spun. This wasn't a game. This wasn't some rich girl's punishment. This was real. And for the first time in her life, Tiffany realized she might not make it out alive. Tiffany's body was paralyzed with fear. The blood pooling on the concrete, the gasps and screams of the other inmates. It was all too much. She had never seen anything like this. Not in her perfect, sheltered life. The guards swarmed in, tackling the girl with the shank to the ground. "Lock down," one of them barked. The entire yard erupted into chaos as alarms blared. Tiffany couldn't move. Her mind screamed at her to run, to do something, but her legs refused to obey. Jada grabbed her wrist. "Move now." Tiffany finally snapped out of it and ran with Jada as the guards shoved the inmates back toward the building. The heavy metal doors slammed shut behind them. Inside, more guards shouted orders, forcing the girls into their cells. Tiffany barely registered at all. Her ears were still ringing from the sounds of the fight. The blood, the screaming. She had always thought she was untouchable. Now she realized just how fragile she really was. Back in their cell, Tiffany collapsed onto her bunk, her heart still racing. Jada sat across from her, stretching her arms. She looked completely unfazed. Tiffany swallowed hard. "How are you so calm after that?" Jada snorted. That was nothing. Happens all the time in here." Tiffany's stomach twisted. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Jada said, cracking her knuckles. "You thought juvie was a joke, didn't you? That you'd get a slap on the wrist and go home?" Tiffany didn't answer. Jada smirked. "Welcome to reality, princess." Tiffany felt sick. She had spent her whole life thinking she was different from everyone else. That her money, her name, her status made her better. But in here, none of it mattered. She curled up on the thin mattress, squeezing her eyes shut. Maybe when she woke up, this would all be a bad dream. The next morning, Tiffany woke up to the sound of the cell door buzzing open. She groggily sat up, her muscles aching from the stiff bed. A guard stood at the entrance, arms crossed. "Hartford, you've got a visitor." Tiffany's heart leapt. "Daddy." She practically jumped to her feet, shoving past Jada as she rushed out of the cell. The guard led her down a long hallway until they reached the visitation room. She stepped inside and froze. Her father, Richard Hartford, sat at a table, his expression unreadable. He was dressed in his usual expensive suit, but there was something different about him today. His usual air of arrogance was gone. Instead, he looked tired. Tiffany rushed forward. "Dad, you have to get me out of here. This place is insane. I saw a girl get stabbed yesterday." Richard didn't move. He simply stared at her for a long moment. Tiffany's heart pounded. "Dad." Finally, he let out a slow breath. "I can't help you, Tiffany." The words hit her like a truck. She blinked. What do you mean you can't help me?" Richard rubbed his temples. "Judge Robinson's sentence is solid. I've had my lawyers on it since the second you were arrested. There's nothing we can do." Tiffany's stomach dropped. "But you always fix things," she protested. "You pay people off, you make calls. Just do something." Richard's expression hardened. "I tried, Tiffany. But you don't understand. The judge isn't interested in money. He's not interested in power. He's trying to teach you a lesson." Tiffany felt like the walls were closing in. No, this isn't fair," she whispered, shaking her head. "You promised nothing bad would ever happen to me." Richard sighed. "And that was my mistake." Tiffany froze. What?" Her father leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "You've never faced consequences, Tiffany. Not once in your life. You've treated people like they were beneath you. And I let you do it because I thought money could protect you forever." Tiffany's breathing grew shallow. "It can't." Richard shook his head. "Not this time." Tiffany's body trembled. "Dad, please. I don't belong here." Richard studied her, his blue eyes filled with something she had never seen before. Disappointment. "You do," he said simply. Tiffany recoiled as if she had been slapped. Richard sighed and stood up. "I have to go." Tiffany's voice cracked. "No, you can't leave me here." Richard gave her one last look. Then he turned and walked out the door. Tiffany lunged forward, banging her fists on the table. "Dad!" But he was gone. And for the first time in her life, no one was coming to save her. The ride back to her cell felt like a blur. Her body was numb. Her mind was spinning. Her father had left her. He had abandoned her. How? How could he do that? Tears burned in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She refused to cry. When she reached her cell, Jada was lounging on her bunk, flipping through an old magazine. Jada glanced up. How was the visit? Tiffany didn't answer. She just climbed onto her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Jada smirked. Let me guess. Daddy couldn't fix this one, huh? Tiffany clenched her jaw. Shut up. Jada chuckled. Tough break, princess. Tiffany squeezed her fists. She hated that Jada was right. But more than anything, she hated that for the first time in her life, she was truly alone. The days dragged on, each one worse than the last. Tiffany learned quickly that juvie was survival of the fittest. If you were weak, you got eaten alive. And right now, she was the weakest one here. The girls bullied her relentlessly. They stole her food, tripped her in the hallways, made jokes at her expense. And Roxy? She was the worst of them all. One afternoon, Tiffany was carrying her tray in the cafeteria when Roxy stuck out her foot. Tiffany didn't see it until it was too late. She tripped, her tray flying out of her hands as she crashed to the ground. Food splattered everywhere. The entire cafeteria burst into laughter. Tiffany lay on the floor, her face burning with shame. Roxy smirked down at her. Oops. My bad, princess. Tiffany's fists clenched. She could feel the rage building inside her. She had never been humiliated like this before, and she had had enough. Slowly, she got to her feet. The room fell silent. Then, she swung. Her fist connected with Roxy's jaw in a loud crack. Roxy stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. The cafeteria exploded into chaos. Tiffany barely had time to breathe before Roxy lunged at her. The next thing she knew, she was tackled to the ground. Punches rained down on her. She fought back with everything she had. But Roxy was stronger. Guards swarmed in, pulling them apart. Tiffany's lip was bleeding. Her head throbbed. But as she was dragged away, she smiled. Because for the first time since she got here, she wasn't a victim anymore. Tiffany barely registered the guards dragging her away. Her heart pounded. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her lip throbbed from where Roxy had landed a solid punch, and she could already feel the bruises forming on her ribs. But none of that mattered. Because she had fought back. For the first time since she arrived in this nightmare, she hadn't just sat there and let someone humiliate her. And it felt good. Too good. The guards tossed her into solitary confinement, the heavy metal door slamming shut behind her. Darkness. Silence. Only the sound of her own breathing. Tiffany leaned against the cold wall, her fingers brushing against her swollen lip. She had never been in a real fight before. Back in her perfect world, her battles were fought with money, influence, and perfectly crafted social destruction. She had ruined reputations, ended friendships, and made people disappear from social circles with just a few words. But here, words meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was strength. She exhaled slowly, staring up at the ceiling. Her father had abandoned her. The girls in here hated her. She was completely alone. So maybe she needed to change. She didn't know how much time passed. Hours. A day? There were no windows, no clocks. Only the empty void of solitary. Eventually, the door buzzed open, and a guard yanked her to her feet. Time's up, Hartford. Back to your cell. Tiffany didn't argue. She followed the guard down the long hallway, her body aching with every step. When she reached her cell, Jada was sitting on her bunk, arms crossed. The moment Tiffany stepped inside, Jada let out a low whistle. Well, look at you, princess. Got yourself thrown in the hole, huh? Tiffany ignored her and sat on her bunk, stretching out her sore arms. Jada smirked. I gotta admit, I didn't think you had it in you. Punching Roxy? Bold move. Tiffany sighed, rubbing her temples. Yeah, well, she had it coming. Jada chuckled. That's the spirit. Tiffany exhaled. Is she gonna come after me again? Jada leaned back, studying her. Maybe, but now she knows you'll fight back. And that changes things. Tiffany frowned. How? Jada's smirk widened. Because bullies don't like when their prey bites back. You've been a punching bag since you got here, but now? You just proved you're not weak. Tiffany processed that for a moment. She had spent so much time trying to pretend she was better than everyone here. But the truth was, she had been nothing but weak. Maybe that's why her father left her here. Maybe this was the lesson Judge Robinson wanted her to learn. She had to stop waiting for someone to save her. Because no one was coming. The next few days were different. Tiffany noticed how the other girls looked at her now. The usual sneers and whispers were still there, but there was something else in their eyes. Respect. Even Roxy kept her distance, though the way she glared at Tiffany made it clear this wasn't over. But that was fine. Tiffany was finally beginning to understand the rules of this place. She had two choices: be prey, or be something more. One afternoon, Tiffany was in the rec yard when Jada approached her. "Come with me," she said. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. "Where?" Jada smirked. "Just trust me." Tiffany hesitated, then followed her. Jada led her to a corner of the yard where a group of girls stood in a loose circle. Tiffany immediately recognized a few of them, girls who didn't take orders from anyone. One of them, a tall girl with dreadlocks and a tattoo on her neck, turned to Jada. "This her?" Jada nodded. "Yep." Tiffany tensed. "What's going on?" The tattooed girl crossed her arms. "Jada says you got some fight in you." "That true?" Tiffany swallowed. "I guess." The girl smirked. "Then prove it." Tiffany frowned. "What?" Jada leaned in. "If you want to survive in here, you need people to have your back. These girls, they're the only real power in this place." Tiffany glanced around. These weren't just any inmates. They were the ones who ran things. The ones even the guards kept an eye on. She could either stay alone or become part of something. Tiffany squared her shoulders. "What do I have to do?" The tattooed girl grinned. "Simple. You fight." Tiffany barely had time to react before a girl lunged at her. Instinct took over. She dodged the first swing, her heart slamming against her ribs. The second punch caught her shoulder, knocking her back a step. Pain exploded down her arm, but she ignored it. She fought back. She swung, landed a hit, got knocked down, got back up. She had never felt adrenaline like this before. This wasn't some spoiled rich girl's tantrum. This was survival. By the time the fight ended, Tiffany was bruised, bleeding, and gasping for breath. But she was still standing. And when she looked up, the tattooed girl was smirking. "Not bad, princess," she said. Tiffany wiped the blood from her lip, breathing hard. "That mean I'm in?" she asked. The girl chuckled. "Yeah, you're in." Tiffany exhaled, a strange feeling settling in her chest. For the first time since she got here, she belonged. That night, as she lay in her bunk, she thought about everything that had happened. Judge Robinson wanted to teach her a lesson. Her father had abandoned her. She had been humiliated, beaten, thrown into solitary. But instead of breaking her, it had changed her. She was learning to survive. And maybe, just maybe, by the time she got out of here, she wouldn't be the same girl who had walked into that courtroom. She would be something else entirely. And she had a feeling Judge Robinson knew that, too. But what he didn't know was that Tiffany Hartford wasn't just going to survive. She was going to take over. Tiffany woke up the next morning feeling different. The bruises from the fight still ached, but she didn't care. Something inside her had changed. She wasn't scared anymore. For the first time since she arrived in juvie, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Power. She wasn't just some rich girl anymore. She was someone people noticed. Someone people respected. As she stepped out into the rec yard, she felt the shift immediately. The whispers weren't as cruel. The stares weren't filled with mockery. Some of the girls even nodded at her as she passed. And at the center of it all, Jada. She leaned against the fence, smirking as Tiffany approached. "Looks like you made an impression." Tiffany crossed her arms. "You knew that would happen, didn't you?" Jada shrugged. "You wanted in. I just gave you the opportunity." Tiffany exhaled. She had spent her entire life using people to climb to the top. Now the game was different. But the rules? The rules were still the same. "All right," Tiffany said, watching the girls in the yard. "What now?" Jada's grin widened. "Now? Now you learn how things really work around here." Tiffany quickly realized that juvie was its own kind of kingdom. And just like in the real world, power belonged to those who knew how to take it. The girls who ran things weren't just fighters. They controlled everything. They had their own system for trading favors, running contraband, and keeping the guards distracted when necessary. It wasn't just survival. It was a business. And Tiffany, she knew business. For years, she had watched her father manipulate deals, crush competitors, and turn nothing into an empire. She may have been new to this world, but she wasn't stupid. So she paid attention. She watched how Jada and the others moved, how they made alliances, how they kept power without drawing too much attention from the guards. And when an opportunity came, she took it. It started small. One day in the cafeteria, a scrawny girl named Lexi hesitated before sitting at Tiffany's table. Roxy's group had been picking on her for weeks, stealing her food and pushing her around. Tiffany saw the fear in Lexi's eyes as she looked around, debating whether it was safe to sit. Tiffany made the decision in an instant. She nodded at the empty seat. Sit down. Lexi hesitated, then quickly sat, keeping her head down. Roxy's crew noticed. One of the girls, an obnoxious blonde named Tasha, smirked as she walked over. Hey Lexi, Tasha cooed. Didn't realize you had a new mommy. Lexi froze. Tiffany, however, didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Tasha, she said, her voice smooth. Tell me something. When Roxy tells you to jump, do you ask how high? Or do you just start hopping like an idiot? Tasha's smirk vanished. The cafeteria went silent. Jada, sitting beside Tiffany, let out a low chuckle. Ooh, I like this. Tasha opened her mouth to fire back, but before she could, a sharp whistle rang through the air. A guard. Enough, the guard barked. Everyone back to your tables. Tasha shot Tiffany a glare but backed off, stomping away. Lexi let out a shaky breath. Thanks, she whispered. Tiffany didn't smile. She didn't need to, because she had just won her first power move. And now, everyone knew it. Over the next few weeks, Tiffany's influence grew. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't the toughest. But she was the smartest. She built loyalty by protecting the weak girls that others overlooked. She traded favors wisely, making sure that if someone helped her, they owed her in return. She learned how to get what she wanted without the guards noticing. And most importantly, she never let anyone humiliate her again. Even Roxy stopped trying to mess with her. But that didn't mean the war was over. Because in a place like this, power was never permanent. One night, as Tiffany and Jada sat in their cell, Jada glanced over. You know Roxy's not gonna let this slide forever, right? Tiffany smirked. Let her try. Jada chuckled. Damn, princess. You're starting to sound like us. Tiffany leaned back against the wall. Maybe I am. Jada studied her for a moment. So, what's the plan? Tiffany tilted her head. Plan for what? For when you get out. Tiffany's smirk faltered. She hadn't thought about that in a while. Before juvie, her future had been simple. Parties. Shopping. A life of luxury without consequences. Now she wasn't sure what she wanted. All she knew was that she would never go back to being the girl she was before. She had changed, and the world better be ready for her when she walked out of these walls. But before she could respond to Jada, something interrupted her thoughts. A loud bang echoed from down the hall. Then, screams. Tiffany sat up, her pulse spiking. What the hell was that? Jada frowned. I don't know, but it ain't good. Suddenly, the alarms blared. A guard's voice crackled over the intercom. All inmates to your cells. Now, footsteps pounded down the hall, shouting. Then, a flash of movement outside their cell. A girl sprinted past, eyes wide with terror. Before Tiffany could process what was happening, another figure appeared. Roxy. And she was holding something. A shank. Tiffany's blood ran cold. Roxy grinned through the bars of Tiffany's cell. Hope you're ready, princess. Then, the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the prison. And all hell broke loose. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. The prison was completely dark. Screams rang through the air, mixed with the chaos of running footsteps and shouting guards. She pressed herself against the cold wall, her heart slamming against her ribs. Jada, she whispered. Right here, Jada murmured back. Outside their cell, Roxy's silhouette moved in the darkness. The dim emergency lights flickered just enough for Tiffany to see the glint of the shank in her hand. You think you're tough now, huh? Roxy's voice was eerily calm. Walking around like you own this place. Tiffany's hands curled into fists. She wasn't scared. She wouldn't be scared. Jada leaned close. Listen to me, she whispered. She can't get in here. But if the power's out long enough, the doors might unlock. Tiffany's blood went cold. She forced herself to stay calm. She refused to show fear. Instead, she took a step forward, glaring at Roxy through the bars. Funny, Tiffany said, her voice steady. I thought the queen of this place wouldn't need a weapon to handle her problems. Roxy's grin widened. Oh, princess, I don't need this. She twirled the shank between her fingers. I just like making sure things get messy. A loud bang echoed down the hallway. Someone was fighting. A guard yelled. Tiffany's mind raced. Jada was right. If the power outage lasted long enough, the automatic locks might fail, which meant Roxy would be inside the cell with her. She couldn't let that happen. Tiffany took a slow breath. Let me guess, she said, keeping her tone casual. You're mad because I didn't roll over and let you treat me like garbage? Roxy tilted her head. You still don't get it, do you? Tiffany narrowed her eyes. Roxy tapped the shank against the bars. This place? It's not about who's the strongest. It's about who's willing to do what it takes. Tiffany clenched her jaw. Roxy smirked. And you? You're not there yet. Then, a loud mechanical click echoed through the halls. Tiffany's stomach dropped. Jada cursed. Oh, hell no. The doors were unlocking. Tiffany barely had time to react before the cell door buzzed and slid open an inch. Roxy grinned. Looks like it's just you and me, princess. She stepped forward, shank glinting in her hand. Tiffany's pulse thundered in her ears. She had two choices. Run or fight. Her old self? The spoiled rich girl? She would have screamed for a guard, tried to bargain, begged for help. But that girl was gone. She refused to be prey. So she squared her shoulders and stepped forward. Jada cursed under her breath. You're crazy, princess. Tiffany didn't look away from Roxy. No, I'm just done being scared. Then, Roxy lunged. Tiffany moved. The shank sliced through the air, missing her by inches. Tiffany swung. Her fist connected with Roxy's jaw in a brutal crack. Roxy stumbled, but recovered fast, snarling. Tiffany barely had time to dodge the next attack. The shank grazed her arm, pain searing through her skin. But she didn't stop, didn't hesitate. She slammed her knee into Roxy's stomach, knocking the air out of her. Roxy staggered, coughing. Tiffany lunged, grabbing her wrist, twisting. The shank clattered to the floor. Tiffany didn't stop. She shoved Roxy hard, sending her crashing into the metal bed frame. Roxy groaned, dazed. Tiffany stood over her, chest heaving. Blood dripped from the cut on her arm. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Roxy chuckled. Damn, she rasped, wiping blood from her lip. Guess you do have it in you. The sounds of guards storming the hallway grew louder. The emergency lights flickered back on. Roxy pushed herself up, wincing. She met Tiffany's gaze. And then, she laughed. A deep, genuine laugh. You really aren't the same spoiled brat that walked in here, huh? Tiffany didn't smile. But she knew Roxy was right. She wasn't the same girl anymore. A group of guards stormed in, weapons raised. Down on the ground. Now, Roxy smirked. Looks like playtime's over. She slowly raised her hands, still grinning. Tiffany did the same. As they were forced to the floor, wrists cuffed behind their backs, Roxy glanced over. You know, she mused. I think I might actually like you, princess. Tiffany exhaled. Because for the first time, she finally understood. This wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. The cold metal cuffs dug into Tiffany's wrists as the guards yanked her up from the floor. Her body ached from the fight, but she didn't care. She had won. Roxy, still grinning through her split lip, didn't resist as they dragged her to her feet. Hope you don't mind solitary, princess, she chuckled. I hear it builds character. Tiffany didn't respond. She was too focused on the guards, on the way they muttered to each other as they restrained her. Then one of them, a burly officer with a scar on his chin, stepped forward. His name tag read Coleman. You two just can't stay out of trouble, huh? He muttered. Tiffany stayed silent. Coleman smirked. You're lucky. The warden wants to see you before we throw you back in the hole. Tiffany's blood ran cold. The warden? Her gut twisted. She had learned how to handle the inmates. She was even starting to understand the guards. But the warden? That was a whole different level. Tiffany was marched through the halls, past cells filled with curious eyes. The usual jeers and laughter followed her, but something had changed. There was respect now. Fear, even. She had fought Roxy and won. Her name meant something now. And yet, as she was pushed into the warden's office, all that confidence flickered for just a moment. The room was simple. No unnecessary decorations. Just a large desk, a few chairs, and shelves stacked with files. Behind the desk sat a woman in her late 50s, her graying hair pulled into a tight bun. Warden Margaret Reynolds. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Tiffany recognized that look instantly. It was the same look her father gave his business rivals right before crushing them. The warden gestured to the chair in front of her. Sit. Tiffany hesitated, then obeyed. Coleman uncuffed her, stepping back. Warden Reynolds laced her fingers together, watching Tiffany in silence. You've been making a lot of noise, Miss Hartford. Tiffany didn't flinch. I defend myself. The warden's lips twitched slightly, as if amused. Is that what you call it? Tiffany lifted her chin. What do you call it? Reynolds studied her. I call it adaptation. Tiffany blinked. The warden leaned back. When you first got here, I assumed you wouldn't last a week. A spoiled rich girl, used to getting her way. She tilted her head. But now, you're not just surviving. You're learning. Tiffany stayed silent. The warden opened a file, flipping through pages. Let's review, shall we? Multiple fights. Defiance of authority. But also, she glanced up. An unusual rise in influence. Tiffany swallowed. Reynolds smiled thinly. You're not just defending yourself. You're building something. Tiffany's heartbeat quickened. She had been careful, smart. But had she underestimated how much attention she was drawing? The warden tapped a pen against the desk. Here's what's going to happen, Miss Hartford. Tiffany clenched her fists under the table. I could send you straight to solitary for what happened today, Reynolds continued. But instead, I have a different idea. Tiffany frowned. What kind of idea? Reynolds smirked. An opportunity. Tiffany wasn't returned to her cell. Instead, she was taken to a different section of the facility. The walls were cleaner here. The girls walking the halls weren't just inmates. They were workers. Tiffany's stomach twisted as she realized where she was. The program unit. This was where girls were sent when the prison thought they could be reformed. They did laundry, kitchen duty, and maintenance work. She watched as inmates scrubbed floors, folded sheets, prepared trays of food for the cafeteria. She turned to Coleman. What is this? Coleman smirked. Welcome to your new job, princess. Tiffany's blood boiled. This wasn't an opportunity. This was humiliation. The next morning, Tiffany found herself standing in a steamy kitchen, wearing a hairnet and an oversized uniform. Her job? Scrubbing dishes. Like some kind of servant. She clenched her jaw as she plunged a tray into soapy water, scrubbing harder than necessary. This was not how she was supposed to be spending her sentence. She was Tiffany Hartford. She was meant for power, not this peasant work. A voice interrupted her thoughts. You look pissed. Tiffany glanced up. A girl with short, curly hair and a lazy smirk leaned against the counter, drying a tray. Name's Carmen, the girl said. Guess we're kitchen buddies now. Tiffany didn't respond. Carmen chuckled. What? Too good to talk to me, princess. Tiffany's grip tightened on the sponge. I don't belong here. Carmen raised an eyebrow. Nobody belongs here. But guess what? We're still here. Tiffany scowled. I was running things just fine until the warden threw me in this place. Carmen laughed. Oh, I get it now. You thought you were special. Tiffany glared at her. Carmen leaned in. Let me tell you a secret, Hartford. You think this is a punishment. Tiffany folded her arms. Isn't it? Carmen smirked. No, it's a test. Tiffany hesitated. Carmen lowered her voice. The warden doesn't just put anyone in the program unit. She only picks the ones she thinks can be useful. Tiffany's pulse quickened. Useful how? Carmen's smirk widened. That's for you to figure out. Tiffany glanced around the kitchen, watching the other girls work. Were they all being tested? What was the warden planning? And more importantly, could Tiffany use it? That night, as Tiffany lay in her bunk, her mind raced. The warden thought she was valuable. She had power before. Now, she had something even better. A chance. But she had to play it smart. She had to figure out what the warden really wanted. Because if she played this right, she wouldn't just survive juvie. She would control it. And once she got out, Judge Robinson would realize something. He hadn't broken her. He had created her. Tiffany lay awake in her bunk, staring at the cracked ceiling of her cell. The warden had put her in the program unit for a reason. This wasn't just about punishing her. This was about testing her. Tiffany had spent her whole life watching people like her father manipulate power. She knew how to read between the lines. And what she saw now, the warden saw potential in her. And that meant opportunity. She wasn't just going to survive juvie. She was going to own it. But first, she had to figure out the game. The next morning, Tiffany walked into the kitchen with a plan. She wasn't just here to scrub dishes. She was here to learn. Carmen was already at the sink, lazily drying a tray. She glanced up as Tiffany grabbed a sponge. Look who's embracing her new life as a peasant. Tiffany ignored the jab. Instead, she looked around the kitchen, watching how things operated. Who's in charge here? She asked. Carmen snorted. You think there's a boss of dishwashing? Tiffany narrowed her eyes. There's always a boss. Carmen studied her, then smirked. Huh, you really are different. Tiffany wasn't interested in compliments. She needed information. Over the next few days, She observed everything. The guards barely paid attention to the kitchen. The supplies were delivered without inspection. The inmates in charge of food distribution controlled who got extra portions. Tiffany saw power in the smallest details. And she wasn't the only one. Carmen watched her closely, amused. You thinking what I think you're thinking? Tiffany smirked. Depends. What am I thinking? Carmen leaned in. That the real power in this place isn't the fighters or the gangs. She gestured to the kitchen. It's the ones who control the system. Tiffany grinned. Finally, someone who understood. A week later, Tiffany made her first move. It started small. She saw how the kitchen girls traded favors for extra food. So she joined in. A stolen piece of bread here. A smuggled orange there. At first, no one questioned it. Then the requests started coming. Inmate 301 needs an extra tray. Inmate 445 wants a favor with the guards. Inmate 112 needs a message sent. And every time, Tiffany said the same thing. What do I get in return? Power wasn't given. It was taken. And Tiffany was taking all of it. One night, as she scrubbed dishes, Carmen smirked at her. You're building a little business, aren't you? Tiffany dried her hands. Let's just say, I know how to make people owe me. Carmen chuckled. You're dangerous, princess. Tiffany smirked. You have no idea. By the end of the month, everything had changed. The kitchen girls weren't just workers anymore. They were gatekeepers. Tiffany made sure nothing moved in juvie without her approval. Extra food had to go through her. Secret messages? She decided who sent them. Guards looking the other way? She made it happen. And the best part? No one even realized what she was doing. Because Tiffany never got her hands dirty. She let other people owe her. She let them do the work. And soon, even the toughest girls in juvie started coming to her for favors. Even Roxy. Tiffany sat in the rec yard when Roxy approached. The scarred girl crossed her arms. I hear you've been making moves. Tiffany smirked. I don't know what you mean. Roxy chuckled. Oh, come on, princess. I know a boss when I see one. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment? Roxy tilted her head. Let's just say, I respect the hustle. Tiffany's heart pounded. If Roxy was acknowledging her power, that meant she had already won. That night, as Tiffany lay in her bunk, she replayed everything in her head. She had built something. She had real power now. Not just in juvie, but in herself. She wasn't just a spoiled rich girl anymore. She was a leader, a strategist. And when she got out, she wouldn't just go back to her old life. She would build something bigger. But before she could celebrate her victory, the guards stormed in. Tiffany barely had time to react before she was yanked out of her bunk. Jada sat up, startled. What the hell? Coleman smirked. Hartford, you've got another visitor. Tiffany frowned. My dad. Coleman's smirk widened. Nope. He dragged her down the hallway. The moment she stepped into the visitation room, she froze. Because sitting at the table, waiting for her, was Judge Robinson. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just a visit. This was something else. And whatever it was about to change everything. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat as she locked eyes with Judge Jamal Robinson. Of all the people she expected to see sitting in the visitation room, he was the last. His deep brown eyes studied her, unreadable as ever. He wasn't just looking at her. He was assessing her, judging, waiting. She hesitated for only a moment before sitting down across from him, forcing herself to keep her expression neutral. Coleman, the guard, stayed by the door, arms crossed, smirking like he was about to watch a show. Tiffany exhaled slowly, folding her hands on the table. What do you want? Judge Robinson raised an eyebrow. No, hello, Your Honor. No pleasantries. Tiffany clenched her jaw. I don't play games. Judge Robinson tilted his head slightly, his expression calm. That's funny. Because from what I hear, that's exactly what you've been doing in here. Tiffany's pulse quickened. So he knew about the kitchen deals, the favors, the power she had built in juvie. But he didn't look angry. If anything, he looked intrigued. Tiffany leaned back. If you're here to tell me I should be ashamed of myself, save it. Judge Robinson didn't flinch. Ashamed? He chuckled. No, Miss Hartford. Quite the opposite. Tiffany blinked. What? He rested his hands on the table. I knew this experience would change you. The question was, how? Tiffany frowned. You're saying you planned this? Judge Robinson nodded. You were reckless. Entitled. You believed the world revolved around you because no one had ever told you otherwise. His voice was firm, but not cruel. So, I made sure you were put somewhere where you couldn't buy your way out. where you had to survive on your own. Tiffany swallowed. He wasn't wrong. She had been that girl. But she wasn't her anymore. Judge Robinson leaned forward slightly. You proved something in here, Tiffany. You adapted. You learned. You built something from nothing. Tiffany narrowed her eyes. Why do I feel like you're leading up to something? A small smile touched his lips. Because I am. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Tiffany hesitated before opening it. Inside was a proposal. Her eyes scanned the pages, her pulse spiking. It wasn't a punishment. It was an offer. A way out. She looked up sharply. What is this? Judge Robinson folded his hands. A deal. One that could change your future, if you're willing to take it. Tiffany's fingers tightened on the pages. What kind of deal? Judge Robinson's eyes darkened slightly. One that tests if you've truly changed. Tiffany's heart pounded. This wasn't just a way to leave juvie. It was a challenge. A final test. And she had no idea if she was ready for it. That night, Tiffany lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced. The deal was insane. But it was also brilliant. Judge Robinson wasn't just offering her freedom. He was offering her purpose. She had always been good at playing the game. Manipulating. Controlling. But this was something bigger. She turned over in her bunk, her fingers brushing against the file he had given her. She had one night to decide. One night to choose her future. And by morning, everything would change. Again, Tiffany barely slept that night. The file Judge Robinson had given her sat on the edge of her bunk like a time bomb, each page containing a choice that could change everything. She had spent weeks conquering juvie, learning how to manipulate, survive, and build power in a place where she was supposed to be broken. And now she was being given an exit. But not just any exit. An opportunity. The moment morning came, she knew what she had to do. Coleman arrived at her cell just after breakfast, smirking. Warden wants you in her office. Now, Jada shot Tiffany a questioning look, but Tiffany just smirked. She wasn't scared. She was ready. The warden's office was just as cold and controlled as the last time she had been there. But this time, Judge Robinson was already waiting. He sat beside Warden Reynolds, his hands clasped, watching her carefully as she entered the room. Tiffany didn't sit until they gestured for her to. Then, with deliberate calm, she folded her hands on the desk. I've made my decision, she said. Judge Robinson arched an eyebrow, and Tiffany took a deep breath. I'll do it. The warden and Judge Robinson exchanged a glance. Warden Reynolds leaned back in her chair. You understand what you're agreeing to, Miss Hartford? Tiffany nodded. It wouldn't be freedom. Not yet. But it was a way out. A program designed for juvenile inmates who showed leadership skills, intelligence, and adaptability. Instead of finishing her sentence in juvie, she would be sent to an intensive rehabilitation program. It wasn't about just serving her time. It was about proving she could become something more. And at the end of it, a clean record. A second chance. Judge Robinson studied her. This isn't a shortcut, Tiffany. If you fail, you're coming right back here. Tiffany smirked. I don't fail. The warden sighed. Cocky as ever. Judge Robinson just chuckled. Good. Because where you're going, you'll need that confidence. Tiffany exhaled. This was it. A new game. And she was about to play it better than anyone ever had. Hours later, Tiffany stood in front of the prison gates, her hands free of cuffs for the first time since she had arrived. A black car waited for her, an officer standing beside it, holding the door open. Jada stood a few feet away, arms crossed. So this is it, huh? Tiffany smirked. Looks like it. Jada shrugged. Don't get soft out there, princess. Tiffany chuckled. You either. For a brief second, they stood there, two survivors who had started as enemies but had become something more. Not friends, but allies. Then, without another word, Tiffany turned and climbed into the car. As the gates closed behind her, she didn't look back. She was done being Tiffany Hartford, the spoiled rich girl. She was something else now, something stronger. And whatever came next, she would own it. The car pulled away from juvie, heading toward an unknown future. And Tiffany, she just smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she was ready. The car ride was silent. Tiffany stared out the window, watching the city blur past her. It was strange, returning to the outside world after so long inside. Juvie had been a nightmare at first, but in the end, she had learned who she really was. And she had won. Now, she was heading towards something new, something Judge Robinson had promised was her second chance. But Tiffany knew better. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a new game, and she was going to win it. The car finally pulled into a long driveway. At the end stood a massive rehabilitation facility. It looked like a mix between a boarding school and a military base. Tall fences, security cameras, but no cells, no bars. This wasn't juvie. This was something else. The officer opened her door, nodding toward the entrance. "Welcome to your new home, Hartford." Tiffany stepped out, straightening her shoulders. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. As she walked through the gates, she noticed other kids like her. Not criminals, not street thugs, but people who had messed up and been given a chance to fix it. Judge Robinson was already waiting for her inside. "Welcome," he said, his deep voice calm. Tiffany exhaled. "So, what now?" Judge Robinson smirked. "Now, you prove to me that you deserve this second chance." Tiffany crossed her arms. "And if I don't?" Judge Robinson's eyes darkened. "Then you go back to juvie. No exceptions." Tiffany clenched her jaw. She had fought too hard to go back. So failure wasn't an option. She nodded. "Fine. What do I have to do?" Judge Robinson handed her a file. Inside are the rules, the expectations, everything you need to succeed. Tiffany glanced at the file, but didn't open it. Instead, she met his gaze. "You think I can do this?" Judge Robinson studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I think you're stronger than you ever realized." Tiffany's breath hitched. Because for the first time, someone wasn't just judging her. They actually believed in her. The next few weeks were brutal. The program wasn't easy. Early mornings, strict rules, leadership training, therapy sessions. They weren't just teaching her how to behave. They were forcing her to change. And for the first time, Tiffany let it happen. She stopped fighting the process, stopped acting like a victim. She listened. She learned. She became better. Months passed. And then, one morning, she was called into the warden's office. Judge Robinson was waiting for her. He smiled. "Congratulations, Tiffany." Tiffany blinked. "For what?" Judge Robinson placed a file on the desk. "Your record is officially clean." Tiffany's breath caught. It was over. She was free. She had won. Judge Robinson folded his hands. "You could go back to your old life now. Money, luxury, all of it. But I have to ask." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you even want that life anymore?" Tiffany opened her mouth, then paused. For so long, she had wanted to return to her world. But now she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. She had changed. She was stronger, smarter, and she didn't need Daddy's money to be powerful. She had built power before. She could do it again. Only this time, she wanted to do it right. Tiffany took a deep breath. "No," she said finally. "I don't think I do." Judge Robinson nodded. "Good answer." Days later, Tiffany stepped out of the facility's gates, a free woman. She wasn't just leaving behind juvie. She was leaving behind who she used to be. And as she walked down the long road toward the city, she smiled. Because the world had no idea what was coming. But soon, it would.